We are in Acts chapter 24. We finished last week with the speech of Tertullus as he is speaking to Felix, the governor. And Tertullus is evidently chosen to present the side of the Jews and of their opposition to Paul and why there has been such a brouhaha around him. And Tertullus is no doubt an extremely good speaker and probably knows things legally. And of course, he starts out by really flattering Felix and the rule of Rome. But then he says this, because I want to bring this out. It's verse 5, so Acts 24, verse 5. I want to bring this out because I want to show you a contrast between what Tertullus said and what Paul then says. Because Tertullus has, he is throwing out all kinds of insults concerning Paul. For we have found this man a plague. All right, a creator of dissension among all the Jews. So this has more to do than just in Jerusalem. All right, the row is in Jerusalem, but this guy is a dissenter among all the Jews throughout the world. And here's the big one, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. Now, he's calling it a sect. And the Romans they believed that Christianity was a sect of the Jews. They believe that. Paul's going to say that it's not. But here's this sect of the Nazarenes. So he says he's a plague, he's a creator of dissension throughout the world, a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. Well, that is, as we mentioned last week, that's quite a statement, because the church doesn't have a ringleader, and certainly not one on the earth. That's Christ as king and head over his church. But Paul wouldn't have even been close to being a ringleader if there was a ringleader. He is one who is traveling in the Gentile world, but to think that people go questions about the church or direction from him concerning the church. Nobody does that. Nobody. But verse 6, he even tried, if that wasn't enough, he even tried to profane the temple, and we seized him and wanted to judge him according to our law. And then he's got to talk about Lysias, and that it was with great violence that Lysias had the audacity, and I put that in, that Lysias came and took him out of our hands. All right, so he would get the report from Lysias, from Claudius Lysias. He would get the report of what occurred when this all began, and also what would have occurred when the council came together and they were going to question Paul, but really no questions were asked except one, and do you revile God's high priest? And that was it. Okay, so they have to say something about it, and it's all Lysias. Lysias was out of control. We had every right, I suppose, to have him. Lysias took him out of all this. All right, and then you're commanding his accusers to now come up here. All right, so that's Tertullus. Tertullus, that's his speech in all this. And with some of it, you're going to have some difficulty proving. Okay, now we come to verse 10. We read his speech last week, and in verse 9, all the Jews assented that these things were true. Everybody, so of these events. They've seen nothing, except they're able to talk about how Lysias took him by violent hands, took him out of their hands by violence, I should say. But, okay, so in verse 12, he says, all right, where is all this? How is it you've called me a plague? How is it that I am a plague? You've said that I am a creator of dissension among all the Jews around the world, throughout the world. All right, where was I doing that in Jerusalem? If that's a true statement, where was I doing that in Jerusalem? Because these men cannot prove or say anything about it, that he hasn't done any of these things. And by his demeanor, I think that everyone there who's going to be of a neutral mindset and not automatically want him guilty, could see that this man, now while he may be lying, is certainly different from Tertullus, who also may be lying. But Tertullus starts off with all this flattery and all this over-the-top sort of thing, where there's no real, list me the breaking of the law. List me the event. So he is a creator of dissension among all the Jews. All right, show me, because Felix has no jurisdiction to anything that may have happened in Asia. He has no jurisdiction. So if we're talking about something that happened in Asia, what's that to him? He can't do a thing about it. That has nothing to do with him. And that would also have nothing to do with those Jews either, because while they do have a court and Rome allows them to have that court, this is beyond their jurisdiction too. They can't, aside from the fact he's a Roman citizen, they can't do these sorts of things. So he keeps it just to Jerusalem. Now, he's not a creator of dissension anywhere. He's not been doing that. And he's going to explain what he has been doing. He's going to explain that. But he says he's been in Jerusalem no more. He's been 12 days since he went to Jerusalem. All right. They've not found him doing any of these things anywhere. Temple, synagogue, or in the city. Okay. You can't show this. And as we said, they know they didn't witness that. Verse 13, nor can they prove the things of which they now accuse me. Now that's big. All right? They have said, Tertullus said that we found that he even tried to profane the temple and we seized him. All right, now he's saying, you can't prove the things of which you now accuse me. You can't prove it. And they're only trusting on the words of some men from Asia, some Jews from Asia, who they're the ones that began all this uproar. They're the ones who thought that he had brought a Gentile into the temple when he hadn't. They've just seen him with the Gentile from Asia. They had seen the two of them together in Jerusalem. But that's not breaking any law. That's not breaking the first law, because they're around Gentiles in Jerusalem. Matter of fact, they were around Gentiles when they were questioning him, because the Romans were there in all this. And but the first part of all this happened when you had some men, these Jews from Asia. They had previously seen Trophimus the Ephesian with him in the city, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. They didn't see it. They just assumed it. But Trophimus wasn't there. And if Trophimus was there, why don't you have him? Okay, why don't you have him as proof of all this? And he receives the death penalty too, because Trophimus would have, it is a capital offense for a Gentile to go into the inner area of the temple, which evidently that's where Paul went, and Paul, as a Jew, could rightfully go. Okay, now we continue on. Let us look at 13 again. Nor can they prove the things of which they now accuse me. But verse 14, but this I confess to you. All right, he's going to say this, that according to the way which they call a sect. Now, he's not calling it a sect because he knows it's not. There's an enormous difference between a sect and something in Judaism, or the law of Moses, and the law of Christ. There's a huge difference between, one would not say that Buddhism was a sect of Judaism. All right, you wouldn't say that. A sect is where there are some variations off of a main line, that there are variations, that they still observe certain things, they still hold certain things to be true, and but they have differences of opinion in all of this, like the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Those are two sects. All right, they still maintain Judaism and the law of Moses. They both are saying we're following the law of Moses, but they're following it differently, and quite differently. And those are sects. But this is not a sect, because while Paul and other Christians would agree the law of Moses is from God, they would also agree that came to a close. We're not following the law of Moses. We're following the law of Christ, who, yes, happened to have been under the law of Moses. He was a Jew, but he's brought something entirely different and perfect. So, Pharisees did. And there are Pharisees on that council. There are Pharisees that, if you're going to judge someone because of belief in the resurrection, well, don't be a hypocrite and just pick on me. Get everybody else in this room. Get everybody else and round them all up. Here's a bunch of them, and you persecute us all at the same time. Don't be a hypocrite and just pick and choose who you want and protect others. But he's saying that they also accept this. Verse 16, this being so, I myself always strive to have a conscience without offense toward God and men. Okay, so here is, no doubt this would come off as sincere. I tell you, it reads that way. And it reads completely different than the man who's trying to ladle out honey on Felix and any other Roman that happens to be in the room. That here is a man who's saying, first in all of this, they've not found me guilty of the things they've said. They cannot prove the things that they have said. And all I have done is do precisely what they say they do. And that is follow the law and the prophets and in the hope of the resurrection. All right, they say that, but obviously they're not. They say it, but yeah, if it means Jesus as the Christ, no. We don't want the prophets, Moses or anyone, pointing that direction. We will want them pointing somewhere else. Now, he says that I myself always strive to have a conscience without offense toward God and men. So he's not this troublemaker. At least he's giving that defense. That he's not a plague. He's not a creator of dissension. He's not one that goes to call offense, that goes to be provocative, to try to provoke violence or provoke an emotional response or provoke something out of men. He's not like that. And that's part of his defense. And those Jews from Asia, they would have to have it in their mind that he's out to destroy everything that is Jewish. He's out to destroy Moses. He's out to destroy the law. He'd be out to destroy the temple. He would see none of it as having any sort of merit whatsoever, but he's saying just the opposite. Now, he understands the temple is not where God is going to be worshiped anymore. He understands that. But he's not going to cause offense there. He's not going to do it because it would bring about this. He would be incarcerated and they would want him dead. And if he had actually done it, they would have killed him. All right? But they can't prove it. They can't prove that he did it. Now, we come to verse 17, and this should put everybody there to shame. Because he's saying why he went to Jerusalem. Now, he said to worship, but now we see more as to the why. It wasn't to be a plague or to be a creator of dissension. Now, verse 17, now after many years, I came to bring alms and offerings to my nation. Now go and prove him wrong. Go, that would be the challenge. All right, Ananias, go and prove that that's not what he was doing. And while you're at it, go ahead and prove that he did precisely what you said he did in the temple. Go ahead and do that. Verse 18, in the midst of which some Jews from Asia found me purified in the temple, neither with a mob nor with tumult. So it's those Jews from Asia who are at fault in this. They saw him, he said, he's purified in the temple. And he's not there with the mob, he's not there with the tumult, and he is doing this. I myself always strive to have a conscience without offense toward God and men. And we have to also remember, and men in this, because he did nothing that was against the law of Moses. He did nothing. That's what they're going to judge him on, plus some other things, but as they want to. But notice that these Jews from Asia, they found him perfectly legal and perfectly complying to everything that should be complied with if he's going to be where they found him. Then he says this, because he mentions them, some Jews from Asia, verse 19, they ought to have been here before you to object if they had anything against me. So here is raising a finger at these others, at Tertullus and at Ananias. All of that was to help the brethren and the brethren others, because Paul is not going to be staying in Jerusalem, the brethren and others, that to help them through that famine. So, Jews? Yeah, the Jews. Yeah. That, yeah, to Jews. Yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, all of the Christians in Jerusalem, unless things had changed, all the Christians in Jerusalem were Jews. So unless that changed. Now it might have over the years, but he's bringing all that to my nation. And here, this is what they're doing. But understand also, even if there were Gentiles in the church in Jerusalem, now we're talking about Jerusalem only. If there were Gentiles there, still, like what we do when there is a disaster, a lot of help comes into a congregation, and it goes to help the members of that congregation. But it's also, once that's done, it goes to the community. Once that's done. Years ago, and this would have been in 92, August 92, Andrew, Hurricane Andrew, went through Homestead, and they're south of Miami. And it went through, if I'm remembering right, it went through Monday, and I went with a group on Friday to help out. And by the time we got there, a lot of things had already been done. That a lot of supplies had been brought into a local congregation. And there was no power, but they already had large generators to run only the kitchens. That was it. Because all these people had to be fed. And one of the instructions for us was, we are going to make sure all the members are dried in. What is dried in? They've got something on their roof, and they're taken care of. Then we go into the community. It wasn't just for the members, it was also for the community. But we have an obligation to them first. We go there first, and once that's done, and it was done, and then it goes to everywhere else. All right. Now the same thing would be true with this. Of all these funds would go to help members of the church, but it would also go to other people in the community. That's what it would be. Now this would put them to shame, or it should, provided they could feel shame. And I'm talking about Ananias and Okay, now, he says, going back to verse 20, or else let those who are here themselves say if they found any wrongdoing in me while I stood before them in the council. So we go back to where that was in chapter 23, and while he did say, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall, for you sit to judge me according to the law, and do you command me to be struck contrary to the law? He rebuked the high priest, but once he's told, do you revile God's high priest? Then Paul said, I did not know, brethren, that he was the high priest. And then he quotes Scripture. You should not speak evil of a ruler of your people. All right, he quotes Scripture. What did he do in all that was wrong? He didn't know that was a high priest, so he said what he said. Once he finds out, well, that's the high priest, then and I apologize greatly for that. But even doing that, all right, there's no death penalty under the law of Moses for that. There's no death penalty for that. That's not a capital crime. nor is it one that should have an entire city in an uproar, because in every quarter it went into an uproar after they shut down the temple for no reason whatsoever. They just go into a panic because of the cry for help, that men of Israel help, and their claim against Paul. And the fact is that nothing actually occurred other than some men assumed something that wasn't so. Now, verse 21, unless it is for this one statement which I cried out. Now he's talking about in the council. There is nothing they found in me that was any wrongdoing, unless it was this one statement which I cried out, standing among them, concerning the resurrection of the dead, I am being judged by you this day. All right, which caused an uproar. All right, now he didn't create that uproar. He knew there was a division there, but we showed where what he said was the truth. He's not just saying it to rile some people up. He's not just saying that. He is saying the truth. But if they can be riled up by that, they got a problem. Okay, they have a serious problem. If this is going to get them bent out of joint and say that he is that he's worthy of death, because they have been saying that, and they were going to kill him in the street. And now note what he does not say. He is giving a defense. Now he's allowed to give a defense. When he makes his speech in chapter 22, he doesn't give a defense concerning what occurred in Jerusalem. He preached a sermon to them. And basically this is what occurred to me. And this is why I'm now different. And it was a sermon to who knows how many people in the street. Now he's truly giving a defense on his behavior in the city, in any synagogue, in the temple, and also in the council. And while the Romans were there, as I speculate, I don't think the Romans really knew what happened, and they wouldn't be completely accurate witnesses because they don't speak Hebrew and they wouldn't know what was said. But here, he's now telling them all what he said. And of course, Ananias would know it. He was there, and that council would know it. They were there. But it is concerning the resurrection of the dead that I'm being judged by you this day. Because Jesus Christ was resurrected. That's just one. The Sadducees would oppose that. Completely oppose that. That there is a resurrection of the righteous. And who is that going to be at this point in time? It's those who are following Jesus the Christ. That's who it's going to be. He did not, he's telling the truth. He's telling the truth. That how many, while the Pharisees would believe in the resurrection, how many of them would actually say, would actually confess Jesus of Nazareth resurrected from the dead? None. None of them would have confessed that. None of them. While they would have said, he will be resurrected at some point with everybody else, they would never say he was resurrected. And he walked out of that tomb. Now, we go to verse 22. But when Felix heard these things, having more accurate knowledge of the way, he adjourned the proceedings and said, when Lysias, the commander, comes down, I will make a decision on your case. So, nothing is resolved. And I'm sure that the council and the high priest, they go back to Jerusalem rather disappointed. They were hoping for a little more progress to be able to kill Paul. But they're not through yet. They're not through. They're going to want to continue to kill him. And it says that Felix has a more accurate knowledge of the way. So Felix has been taught something. Now his wife is Jewish, so she may know some things that that she would have learned from other Jews. And of course, Felix could have learned some things from rather his wife or Jews or fellow Roman Gentiles. Okay? But he knows more. He knows more accurate. He has more accurate knowledge of the way. Now, he doesn't know enough, because we're going to come down here to verse 25. That's where we're going to get for today. So he commanded the centurion to keep Paul and let him have liberty, and told him not to forbid any of his friends to provide for or visit him. Okay, so when it says let him have liberty, it doesn't mean you're not in our keeping anymore, or you can just roam however you please now. You know, you're free. It doesn't mean that. It means he's not going to be shackled to a wall, and he is. They're going to protect him, and it's not resolved yet, so they can't just let him go. They can't do it until there is some kind of decision, and Felix is not a good man. All right, he's not going to kill Paul, but Felix is not a good man, because Felix would let him go for the price. And that's what he's hoping for. That's what he's hoping for. So Felix isn't without his shadier side to him. All right, but he's being compassionate, and he sees no reason why he should treat Paul in any bad way. Now, verse 24, so he can have visitors, friends, they can provide for him, they can visit him. Verse 24, and after some days, when Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, he sent for Paul and heard him concerning the faith in Christ. So he's there to hear more, but he wants a bribe. Okay, and I guess to not be accused of taking bribes, he can't just give an obvious hint of, for so much money, I'll free you. All right, he's not doing that. He's not doing it. But in his mind, that's what he's willing to do. Okay, so he brings Drusilla, and the two of them listen to Paul. Now this is another person that actually it's a fulfillment of what Christ told Paul he would be doing, that he's going to be talking to rulers, he's going to be talking to kings. He's going to be doing that, and here's one of these rulers with his wife. Now, verse 25. Now, as he reasoned, look at this. This is a summation of what he spoke. And this is one of those places where I wish I had it word for word, but we don't need it. All right, it would just be it would be a repeat of what we already know and have. But just for the sake of it, I would like to have what he said, but we don't. All right, but here's a summation. Now, as he reasoned about righteousness, self-control, and judgment to come, Felix was afraid and answered, "Go away for now. When I have a convenient time, I will call for you." He was afraid. It was getting under his skin. It was approaching his heart. That's And I tell you right now, I've had a similar situation where it was a friend of mine, and we got into a discussion. We got into a discussion very similar of righteousness, self-control, and judgment to come, and he was visibly getting frightened. He was visibly getting frightened, and he did not want to hear that anymore. He did not. But here is this, and this is a great way to show what he spoke of. And these are enormous subjects: righteousness, self-control, judgment to come. All of this as judgment that will take place. And yes, you, Felix, will be judged by Jesus of Nazareth. You'll be judged by God. And, okay, Felix says, go away for now. When I have a convenient time, I will call for you. And he is going to meet with him more, but only for the potential of getting money. That's it. And never out of sincerely wanting to know more of tell me more about this. Let's go deeper into this. But it's only for the sake of money, and that's it. And soon, he will be replaced by Festus, and Paul's going to be handed off now to the next governor, and Festus is going to have to decide what to do with him from that point on. And I appreciate everybody being with us this morning, and we hopefully can continue this next week. Thank you, everybody.